In 2001, when Sam Lake's snarling face was plastered on the one and only Max Payne, it truly changed the landscape of gaming forever. It was the first game to incorporate slow-mo bullet time effects, showing homage to the newly released Matrix movie as well as the classic John Woo Hong Kong action flicks. Now every time a shooter is released with a bullet time slow motion effect, it is deemed a Max Payne clone in some way or another, even coming full circle in the realm of inspirations when John Woo himself produced a game that is known as a Max Payne clone, when Max Payne was originally inspired by John Woo. Inspiration inception. And I use the term clone as a basic descriptor. I don't think games being clones are inherently a bad thing. I made a whole video on Dante's Inferno discussing that idea a long time ago. You don't need to go watch that, trust me. But it was only a year after Max Payne was released onto the world that perhaps the most blatant Max Payne clone was released, titled like a true 80s action movie, Dead to Rights. A game that I adored back in 2002, but as I like to do on my channel, let's jump back 21 years and take a look and see if this game was really that good, or is it all just nostalgia?
This is Slate. I'm on it.
In an effort to not repeat myself in regards to the Max Payne comparisons throughout this entire video, I'm just gonna run through a few that stand out among the crowd. The game is a neo-noir third-person shooter, taking place in a gritty urban landscape run by corruption starting at local mob bosses and rising up to the mayor of each respective city. Each game starts with a monologue from the protagonist about how much of a hellhole their city is. In both games, you play as a hard-boiled detective that suffers traumatic family deaths very early in the game that not only drives the character to seek out vengeance and justice, but also untangles several layers of conspiracy as well. There are femme fatale characters at certain points in each game, and of course both games involve slow motion diving around while firing a wide array of bullet delivery devices. To quickly mention some aspects in Dead to Rights that Max Payne doesn't have: cool disarm moves, auto-targeted shooting, fisticuffs, interesting mini games, and dog. Jack Slate is the main protagonist of Dead to Rights. He is a police officer in Grant City, the so-called toughest place on Earth. At Jack's side is his trusty canine companion named Shadow, who is just as ruthless as Jack when it comes to taking down bad guys. While on patrol, Jack responds to a call at a construction site, where he rams his cruiser through the front gate and immediately starts to take fire from construction workers, so something fishy's going on off the jump. After gunning down every construction worker in a 10-mile radius, he comes across a body on the job site, a gunshot victim that hits a little close to home: his father. As the chief shows up, he tries to send Jack home, but obviously he isn't gonna let the person who shot his father get away with it, so he decides instead he's gonna hunt down that person who is responsible. His first person of interest is the local crime boss named Augie Blatz, so that's where he heads to. Jack goes off on these tangents periodically throughout the game, and the writing of the dialogue really makes this game something special, because sometimes I don't know how serious you're supposed to take this game. Like Max Payne was cut and dry. This is tragic and depressing and bad, but Dead to Rights is downright goofy sometimes, even when discussing the serious moments. Like right after leaving to avenge his dad, he talks about how he's gonna do something real stupid. He also tosses away his gun for whatever reason, like I think he's gonna need that, but the sound effect that happens when he does this is just the icing on the cake.
Justice may not be smart, but it should be honest. I was about to do something real stupid.
It's marvelous, and the whole game has this campy charm to it that I just absolutely adored. But before we discuss the story of this game, let's break down something that I didn't adore all that much: the gameplay.
Look at this, fellas. Our bleeding hero.
While the writing and the voice acting is a charming product of its time, the gameplay and controls unfortunately are too a product of their time, and console-based shooters in the early 2000s aren't typically the best games in existence. Most of the game is harmless, but a few things like inverted camera controls and funky targeting mechanics really become aggravating at several points in the game. The game is broken down into three primary aspects of gameplay: shooting, fighting, and minigaming. Shooting is obviously the biggest biggest thing in this game. This is through and through a spray and pray shooter, and for the most part it's a damn good time. The game uses a lock-on targeting system for shooting, with options to zoom in and free aim if you really wanted to, but it's something that I never really used in the game. The reticle changes color depending on how good of a shot you have on that particular enemy, taking into account how far away they are, which weapon you're using, and if they're behind cover or not, with red being a sure hit, yellow being a high chance, and green being a likely miss. And once it turns blue, it means that that tough guy is dead. To right. You lock onto enemies and blast away until they aren't standing to fight back. You can hot swap between targets really smoothly as you run around, but also as you take cover and dive. The cover-based shooting is another thing that I rarely used in this game. It would come in handy in a pinch, but most of the time diving around was really the way to go. When you're locked on and enter a dive, you go into bullet time, slowing time down and allowing you to unload on every beating heart standing in your way, hot swapping between them all as you gracefully swan dive to the pavement. The alternative to taking cover when it comes to dodging incoming fire is to use human shields. You can grab lowly thugs and walk around with them and use them as meat shields to your heart's desire. This functions a lot like the Punisher game, where you can use the person until they die or everyone firing at you dies, at which point you kindly thank them for their service with a bullet. Grabbing enemies while unarmed also initiates a cool disarm move, with several being unlocked throughout the game, changing animations depending on the type of weapon you're disarming, and they are stylish executions that you can do while casually stealing their weapon. You can also quickly deploy your dog Shadow at enemies as well to kill them instantly, with the added bonus of the good boy bringing back their weapon to you. While I use this mechanic a lot, Shadow having the same animation and single attack move left me wanting more from having a badass dog sidekick. It pretty much functions as a free kill button on a cooldown, but there is a cheat code that allows you to spam it non-stop, which was pretty cool too. This type of gameplay comes off easy at first, just locking onto enemies and blasting away with many options at your fingertips to replenish your guns and ammunition, but it gets exceptionally more difficult as the game goes on, with tougher enemies and more of them. There is a decent variety of weapons in the game, from pistols to SMGs, rifles and shotguns, and even some cooler things like rocket launchers thrown in for some good fun, but as most of games of this era go, you tend to float around your favorites, which in my case were the rifles and the gnarly shotguns, especially the automatic one that you get in later levels. Unfortunately, weapon choice is not up to you at all times, as you simply just pick up whatever weapon the enemies have, and once Jack depletes all the ammo of that particular gun, he just tosses it away. So if another baddie doesn't show up with that same weapon, there is no way to get it back. This provided a sort of forced variety to the gunplay that I can't really say that I was too mad at. It made the game feel fast paced and in the moments just picking up whatever was available and squeezing the trigger until it clicks, and then ripping another gun from a poor henchman's hand or getting your dog to do it and then moving on with your business. One mechanic in the game that I liked a lot at the beginning was the option to toss an explosive canister of some kind into a group of enemies, or just one unlucky chap, and auto-target it as it falls, creating a beautiful explosion. Once you start to get overrun by faster moving and more powerful enemies in later stages of the game though, you'll end up getting shredded by gunfire before you have time to toss it and shoot it, so it fell out of favor real quick in that regard. All in all though, the gunplay was a lot of fun, and since it is the primary thing that you'll be doing, I have little to complain about. Unfortunately, in this game there is also sections with forced unarmed combat, and to be blunt, it's just not what I'm here for. Fortunately, it's fairly simple and offers a change of pace from constant flying lead, but there are plenty of other things that suffice better in that regard, like the minigames and boss fights, but we'll get to those in a moment. The fighting is essentially just a mixture of smashing the punch and kick buttons into a couple different combinations, but no directional movements or crazy special moves, just mashing the buttons and blocking here and there. The enemies come on just as heavy in unarmed sections as they do in the rest of the game, but instead of slow motion dives and taking hostages, you're instead required to just block their attacks just to make it out alive. And blocking drains the same meter that you use for the dive move and the gunplay, so once it runs out, you're kinda shit out of luck. You can also grab enemies and toss them around, but I don't even know if that does any damage to them, and it's often riskier going for that move instead of just punching them in the face. Shadow is also not with you in these moments in the game either, so there isn't even the option of a free kill button to lighten the load a little bit. Luckily, hand-to-hand combat is a small percentage of the game. The prison level is probably the most prominent level where you don't have any weapons, I guess for obvious reasons, but most other levels give you some kind of firepower after only a couple fights here and there. One of the other main aspects of the gameplay comes in the form of minigame. These are usually brief little puzzles that come about here and there, like picking locks by locking cylinders at the right moments to line them all up. But there are also ones that take a bigger role in the levels. In the second mission of the game, you start off by playing as a stripper on stage pole dancing as a distraction for Jack to sneak through the club unnoticed. And while this may seem like a minor little side game, there are 3 whole waves of button presses that you have to do. This scene is a solid 5 minutes of original Xbox graphic glory, and trust every 9-year-old with a controller replayed this level many times over. Totally not speaking from experience though, I was a mature 10 years old when this game came out. There's also a level solely focused around disarming bombs found inside of a hotel building. You race against the countdown timer to guide a little ball through the circuit board on these explosives. It's like a game of operation as well, because if you touch the sides, then boom goes the dynamite. And the game doesn't just let you try the puzzle over again either. Back to the last checkpoint you go. This level was full of minigames actually. Getting to these bombs involves another type where you control Shadow as he sniffs out exactly where these explosives are in the building. This is really the only time that you control him, and well, it's pretty lackluster. Especially considering the first level taught you the basics of controlling Shadow, so there was an implication that using him would be a bigger part of the game, but this was really it. And after you disarm all the bombs in the same building, you then have to make your way around to random fires and hallways that you have to put out by finding fire extinguishers in supply closets. This whole level was just made to slow the game down, I think. There are a few other minigame puzzle type things thrown about in the game, but all of them are little more than just entertaining changes of pace to break up the non-stop action. And most of them were pleasant to see. Except the bombs, they went a little too far overboard in my opinion. There were way too many of them, and failing them was a big setback. Now that we've discussed the gameplay and the overall mechanics, let's see how it comes together with the fantastic writing and dialogue that this game had to offer. Jack Slate busts into a construction site. He got a distress call from dispatch and decided to respond as aggressively as possible. And good thing, his intuitions were correct. Crazy construction workers dropped their nail guns and picked up their bullet guns, and Jack is quick to put them down. This level functions mostly as a tutorial for basic mechanics in the game, but once you reach the end of the construction site, Jack discovers a dead body that isn't one of the dozens that he shot himself. Nope, this one was his father, and someone murdered him in cold blood. The chief shows up to the scene and tries to send Jack home, but that's not gonna happen. He's gonna hit the streets and find out who did this. Suspect number 1 is Augie Blatz, a local crime boss who holds up at a strip club called the Den of Iniquity. A fantastic name. Jack's father was a detective on the force as well, and he was very interested in Augie's income source for his philanthropy. And while many in the underground know it's from drugs and racketeering, he has the public eye fooled with his giving personality. Inside the club, Jack runs into Hildy. She was an assistant to Jack's father, but also for some extra cash, she dances at the Den of Iniquity. She asks Jack not to tell his dad about her being there, but he very cut and dry tells her that he's dead. I don't know why, but this line delivery was my favorite.
You won't tell him, will you? It'd probably kill him.
Yeah, don't worry about it. He's already dead.
What?
Jack tries to make his way to the back room to see Augie, and Hildy offers to distract the bouncers with her fantastic dance moves. The distraction doesn't do much good for clearing security, so Jack resorts to pulling the fire alarm and clearing the club of all the people, with just him left in the club with the staff, and it's time to throw down. After fighting some staff members and some random counterfeit clothes importer named Boris, Jack eventually busts out the guns to take out waves and waves of enemies and ultimately makes his way up to where Augie is holed up. And I gotta tell you, I didn't expect this voice actor to do a bad impression of Christopher Walken, but like everything else, I absolutely adored it.
Officer Slate, what brings you out on a night like tonight?
Augie makes a run for it, and Jack follows in hot pursuit, gunning down no less than 50 dudes before hitting the streets and probably killing another 50, all before Augie runs into a building and retreats to his apartment. But once Jack gets there, he finds that Augie is taped to a chair, and in his surprise, he is shot from the shadows by some mystery man, who then picks up Jack's gun to kill Augie with it. This hitman starts talking to someone on the phone, the person who arranged this whole production, I guess, and they clearly want Jack Slate left alive to be framed for the murder of Augie. This hitman gloats about how good of a shot he is to shoot Jack in the head without killing him, and he says that police would soon show up to both save him and arrest him for the murder of Augie. And right before Jack passes out, this guy also tells him that Augie Blatz is not the one who killed his father.
Augie Blatz.
did not kill your father.
While there are so many loopholes here on why Jack would even be arrested for killing Augie, seeing as how he got shot in the head first, so the killing would have been self-defense, it is simply not addressed at all. Instead, the game flashes forward 7 months to Jack in prison, facing execution. More loopholes right off the bat. No way someone would get through trial, let alone be up for execution in as little as 7 months. And also, once you step foot out of your cell, inmates start fighting you immediately, saying, "Hey, it's that cop," like you haven't been cellmates for over half a year at this point. Anyway, Jack is told from a friend inside that there's an inmate that is planning an escape, and he also knows someone in the workshop that makes the electric chair malfunction, allowing Jack a window to escape with this other inmate. After fighting through multiple cell blocks of angry inmates, Jack visits a guy in the workshop that says that battery acid on the conduits of the chair will cause it to short out and allow him to escape. But in exchange for this battery acid, this guy wants some packs of cigarettes. Jack hits some other cell blocks for packs of cigs, doing typical jailhouse competitive things, I guess, lifting weights, hitting the speed bag, arm wrestling. I don't know, I've never been to jail myself, so this part seems to add up. There is no way that this built motherfucker is struggling to press 135 though. Anyway, he exchanges the cigarettes for the acid, and now he's on the hunt for the other inmates with the escape map, who is called Tattoo, for, well, I guess you can guess why. On the way to meet him, he runs into the warden who is kicking Shadow in his kennel, which I guess there's just an animal pound in the middle of this prison for whatever reason. Anyway, Jack kicks the warden's ass for fucking with his dog. Once Jack finds Tattoo, he finds that he isn't very willing to share his escape map. Jack makes quick work of him though and takes the map for himself before going back to his cell to enact his own plan of escape. The next day, Jack is put up for execution by electric chair. He is strapped in and given his last rites. Luckily, the pastor that's giving him his final prayer is also helping him out, giving Jack a razor blade to cut the straps and dumping battery acid on the wires for him as he recites his passage. Once the switch is pulled, the power surges, and in the confusion and blinding flashes, Jack escapes his chair and manages to strap down the warden to the seats before the power comes back online, effectively frying the executioner. Jack quickly runs out of the prison, fighting inmates and guards in his path. He uses the escape map to get to the shower drain and leave the prison through the sewer tunnels. Once he's out, there is conveniently a car there waiting for him to try to run him down. Jack is able to dodge this car, and the guy ends up just knocking himself out as he hits a tree. Jack takes his car, his ID, and his phone, and he skedaddles. Jack decides he's gonna head back to Augie's apartment to lay low, as he assumes that no one would be back there anytime soon.
I had plenty of work ahead of me. Solve my father's murder and find the guy who set me up. And to do that, I was gonna need guns and information, more or less in that order.
On the hunt for guns and information, Jack heads to Chinatown for guns from a guy named Fat Chow, who supplies the Triads with all the hardware that they need. Obviously, shortly after arriving, Jack is gunning down Triad thugs in quick succession. Before cornering Chow in a gambling den, he asks if he knows Silt, the guy that tried to run him over at the prison, and he says that he usually hangs out at the Black Orchid, a massage parlor. Soon after, cops show up, and since Jack is still an officer of the law, instead of shooting his way out, he simply just runs away. After getting to Black Orchid, it's already looking suspicious.
Something smelled fishy, and it wasn't the sushi bar.
He ends up getting ambushed by more Triads, and after punching them all in the face a whole lot, he runs into the man that he is looking for, Marvin Silt. Silt says that he just had instructions to kill anyone that wasn't Tattoo coming out of the prison, and it was really nothing personal. He said that he got the job from a guy named Gopher, but before he says who Gopher was working for, he is shot and killed by a lady who entered the room. Her name is Eve, and she's a killer from some other organization. She simply just wanted Silt dead because he may have killed her brother or something, but she seems friendly enough. She gives Jack some information on the guy that framed him in Augie's apartment. She says that it could be a guy named Patch, a high-tier assassin who is very expensive to hire and even harder to find. And it's not long before they have to shoot their way out of this massage parlor once backup arrives, so Jack and Eve together make the escape, killing Fat Chow once and for all in the end too. Eve gives Jack her card and tells him to call her if he wants to shoot more bad guys together. But Jack has other things on his mind. Jack heads to his dad's grave to say his goodbyes, since I'm assuming the funeral was held while Jack was in jail, but I don't know why he decided to go in the middle of the night. While he's there, he also happens to run into Hildy in the middle of the night, just there as well to pay respects. Anyway, Hildy says Jack's dad was working on an investigation of Mayor Pinnacle and his military police force called GAC, Grant City's anti-crime unit or something like that. Jack's dad was hired by the mayor candidate Gloria Exner to uncover dirt on him to take take him out of power. And as they are talking, shadows are seen running around in the graveyard, and soon the shadow starts shooting machine guns. Once Jack sees that they aren't shadows, the reveal he gets really isn't much better.
Clowns with guns? I'll be having nightmares about this for months.
The graveyard is a massive arena of shooting clowns with guns, and after 10 minutes of fighting these freaks, even taking out a guy on a minigun at one point, Jack escapes. He calls up Eve and asks if she knows anything, and she says that it probably wasn't the mayor trying to kill him because they are planning to kill the mayoral candidate Gloria Exner at the debates tomorrow. So he forgets the clowns for now and decides to rendezvous with Eve to protect Gloria from the thugs. Well, Eve is there to kill more people that she needs to kill. Jack is there to save Gloria at least. On debate day, Jack steals a news chopper to cover Eve as she infiltrates the building, and for whatever reason this news chopper has guns strapped to it. Jack clears out waves and waves of enemies for Eve to move forward. She eventually comes across a guy planting bombs, which Jack walks her through how to disarm since she just shoots the guy in the face instead of having him do it. But it all comes to a close when the infamous killer Patch gets the better of Eve on the rooftop. Jack's visceral reaction brought a tear to my eye.
Eve! Behind you! No!
Jack follows Patch out of the building and into his limo, where he shoots probably 1,000 rounds into it and dodges rocket launcher attacks before it's finally sent crashing. Patch dies in the crash and Jack is really bummed out about it, but he takes his pager for any new leads. From here, the only place to go is to find Gloria Exner. He saved her from the thugs at the debate, and now it's time to see what she knows about all this going on. When he gets to the hotel that she is staying at, he sees GAC Bomb Squad bringing bombs into the hotel and setting up an explosion. So of course he gets in there, and this is the level where you control Shadow a little bit to sniff the bombs out. And of course, a normal skill of being a detective, Jack knows how to disarm all these bombs, and he clears all of them before they are set off. On higher levels, there are some fires that get set, and Jack has to answer that problem too, with fire extinguishers. He gets to Gloria in time to save her and heads to the rooftop for a battle with a flamethrower cop who he makes quick work of and drops a nasty one-liner on as he kills.
You boys know it's not safe to play with matches?
And trust me, his one-liners get better as this game goes on. Jack and Gloria get off the building safely, and unfortunately Gloria has no information on anything. She just knows that people are out to kill her. Jack says that she can hide out at her dad's cabin while he continues to hunt down this corrupt mayor. Jack gets a message on Patch's pager. It's from Gopher, the guy who also hired Marvin Silt at the prison, and he wanted to meet at the docks, so Jack heads there. He confronts Gopher and drops another sick one-liner.
Where's Patch?
Busy getting him bombed.
Oh, bloody hell.
Many shootouts ensue, of course. Jack takes out mercenaries and assassins and even a chopper on the docks before coming across a big motherfucker with a crossbow named Longshoreman X, like if Mr. X took up fishing, I guess. Jack took a beating from this guy, even though he does win in the end, and he hobbles over to the diner where Hildy works before passing out. Hildy stitches Jack up and gets him good to go, but as he wakes up, another guy walks in the diner, a former boxer turned thug named Diggs. He assumes that Jack came into this diner and he's on the hunt, and Jack tries to get the drop on him by coming out of the back room, but it doesn't really go so smoothly. Jack wakes up chained upside down being interrogated by an international criminal named Fahouk, and after playing a minigame of Don't Drown, Shadow comes to his rescue and releases him. He escapes the dock after fighting even more hired guns and thugs and almost gets run down by a truck that ends up spilling its load everywhere, revealing what is actually going on here.
The truck spilled its contents like a biblical revelation. This was all about gold, money, the root of all evil.
Jack leaps on the back of another truck to find out where it's headed, which turns out is an abandoned factory somewhere where they are melting down tons of gold. Like literally tons. There are hundreds of millions of dollars of gold here easily. Jack even runs into some old friends here like Tattoo, who's clearly doing well for himself after escaping prison. Jack also figures everything out once he sees that there are tunnels built right into the factory. The old subway system project went bankrupt, and Mayor Pinnacle has been using these tunnels to steal and melt down all the gold in the city, and even using it to have prisoners escape the prisons to work in this factory. It was all part of his big master plan. The city even used to be called Glitter City apparently because it had a bunch of gold in it, but the name was changed to Grant City once it all disappeared. And now Jack knows the whole truth, and he knows why his dad was killed, because he exits one of these tunnels right where his dad was shot, at that construction site from the very beginning of the game. So Jack's dad too also found all this out. From here, Jack decides to infiltrate the mayor's new office, which is inside of a prison where Jack was once a prisoner. It's now abandoned due to the escape when Jack left, but the mayor has taken it over as a base of operations. But before he can reach the mayor, he gets confronted by Diggs again in the gas chamber, and this time it's an even fight. Well, until Diggs turns on the gas and then puts a mask on himself while still punching Jack in the face. Luckily, you can punch the mask off of him and put it on yourself during the fight, and it turns into a big game of who can wear the mask the longest and who can lose oxygen the fastest. Jack, of course, wins this fight and drops another fucking sick one-liner.
Dumb son of a bitch.
Jack finally has a face-to-face with the mayor, and he gets the real answers to his dad's death. The mayor admits to being corrupt with the prison and the gold, but he is not responsible for killing Jack's dad. That was the corrupt chief of police, Hennessy, who uses Mayor Pinnacle's gold to fund his anti-crime task force. And when Jack's dad found out about the gold, Hennessy had him killed because that was his meal ticket and he didn't want to lose it. The mayor offers Jack a deal. Take out Hennessy and he would pardon Jack of all his crimes. Jack, meanwhile, is having a Jimmy Neutron brain blast trying to figure everything out. Jack takes the deal from Pinnacle and breaks into police headquarters to take Hennessy's files. He guns down a bunch of GAC boys and even comes across clown masks in the evidence locker, revealing who was really after him that night in the graveyard. He also gets the idea to take down Hennessy and Mayor Pinnacle together because he can't let corruption exist in his city. He takes the files and he calls up Gloria Exner with all the information. But of course, it's not that easy. Gloria takes the files and then she pulls a gun on Jack. She decided to cooperate with Mayor Pinnacle instead of fighting him. But luckily, Hildy is there again, randomly in the middle of the night at the graveyard, to save the day. She shoots Gloria and takes the files, but unfortunately for Jack, she too has flipped to work for Fahouk, who offered her a lot of money for these files, and well, she's got bills to pay, because she used to work for Jack's dad, but now Jack's dad is dead, so she got no job. And she got fired from the strip club after that whole dancing incident. Jack's been double-crossed, like, for the 5th time. Jack follows Hildy out to the Air Force base, where Fahouk is going to take the files and flee the country. He sneaks up on Hildy meeting with Fahouk, who offers her gold bars in exchange for the files. As she's complaining about not getting cash, she too has been double-crossed. Fahouk is working with the mayor, who sneaks out from the shadows and shoots Hildy in the back. Jack, fueled by rage, fights this giant Wilson Fisk of a mayor to the death, who takes no damage from punches that you give him. You gotta take his back and choke him out a bunch of times to beat him. One of the most annoying fights in the game by far. After taking Pinnacle out for good, he runs after Fahouk before he can escape. He does one of the most bombastic stunts that I've ever seen to propel himself into the cargo plane that is taking off, using the explosion of a motorcycle that he shoots mid-air to launch himself into the open cargo door. Just brilliant. Jack starts taking out everyone he can on this plane and even tries to save a few hostages, or so he thought.
It's okay, ladies. I'll get you out of here and back to your families. Whoa, hey, I'm trying to save you.
And once he reaches Fahouk, it turns into an annoying fight to have. He has a bottle of something that heals him to full every time he drinks it, and he also uses it to blow fire at you at certain points in the fight. But it's not as bad as the mayor fight in my opinion, it's just a little tedious. After Fahouk makes his exit, Jack helps the injured pilot land the plane safely. Once on the ground, Jack meets with a news reporter to give him all the files for him to report on the evening news, and he tells him to also report that Jack Slate died in the crash. There is one final loose end to tie up: the chief of police, Hennessy. You head back to the hotel where the bombs were to confront Hennessy and the rest of his GAC crew. You have a quick little fight with him in a fancy taser riot shield thing, but once it fails after running into a water fountain, he just runs off for you to chase him again. You soon meet back up with him in the furnace of the building to fight Hennessy hand to hand, but somehow Hennessy is able to catch his hands on fire for the fight, and it doesn't really do much good though. You just shove him in this open furnace a few times and he dies pretty quickly. Much easier than the mayor and Fahouk, and really every other fight in the game. It was super easy for a final fight. But that is the end of the game. Jack took out all the corruption in the city and stacked up an impressive body count. Not counting the hundreds of unnamed thugs, plenty of important people died as well. Mayor Pinnacle, the mayor candidates, Gloria Exner, the chief of police, Hennessy, the warden of the prison, his crush Hildy, his hit woman girlfriend Eve, and plenty of others. The city is by no means free of crime and corruption, but hell, it was a good start. It's gonna take a lot to rebuild the spots that need to be filled, but Jack did his best to fix his city. And at the very least, he closed the case that his dad died trying to crack, and he avenged his dad's death. While it's not the most deep or in-depth story, I will say it's probably on par with Max Payne's story, maybe a little more comedic and cartoonish, but stories and games around this time, especially shooters on consoles, just weren't that in-depth, so this is a pretty good story considering the time it was released. Dead to Rights was a lot of fun to play, and while the gameplay definitely suffers in comparison to modern titles, the story and writing that this game had to offer was the perfect kind of campy dialogue that I love, and it was a blast when it came out as well. It was received generally well. It certainly wasn't Game of the Year or the best thing on the shelves, but it was a nice story-based action shooter with some unique elements like takedowns and slow-mo bullet time stuff that was still kind of new at the time, and having a dog companion, that was pretty freaking cool, and everybody thought so as well. I mean, it was a good enough reception to have a few sequels come out to continue the tale of Jack Slate and Shadow, that I of course will take time to visit on this channel as well. I'm really interested in seeing how Dead to Rights 2 holds up, because that's a game that I really enjoyed back in the day, but I think it's one that aged even more poorly than this one, but I guess we'll see. I'd like to shout out my patrons and YouTube members for holding it down: Schwinn Dixie, Kid Kingpin, Zachary Parkerson, Snowflake, Anonymous Starkweather, Crash Bandicoot 25, Grand Taquito, Ben Stevens, Potty, Yayman, Marshall Duff, Alfred Correa, Scribe Slendy, Matthew Taylor, Ice Ham Jello, Nick LaRosa, Grizzly Wizzly, Sexy Pickles, Sick Kitty is Dead, and Forge'em Nas. And as always, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. I hope it's not 3 months before I put out another video. Peace.